There, friends, Dave Paulides, NABS Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is Huck TV. She's the executive producer. She's a happy dog. Oh, that's a good happy dog. Yes, a good girl. Yes, a good girl. And we're going to talk about two missing persons cases today. And even though they're missing persons cases, one of the cases isn't quite a 411 case, and you're going to understand why. So back when I was much younger, living in California, I owned a boat with another policeman. Huck wants to go out here. There you go. Thank you. And my sister owned a house at Tahoe Keys in South Lake Tahoe. And I spent a good portion of my life growing up on that lake because my folks had a house on the west side of Lake Tahoe. Well, in Tahoe Keys, my sister had a boat ramp and a little dock. And so I always used to go up there with my buddies, friends, put my boat on the dock. And then we'd travel up and down the west side of the lake because there were a couple of good places to eat out there and water ski and just have a good time. One thing I learned very early on is I went to a marine safety class for police officers and sheriffs. And I learned about safety on the water. And I was very fastidious about ensuring that everybody that got on that boat knew exactly where the life preservers were at, knew exactly where our marine radio was at, and we'd always know how far we were from shore. Tahoe was a kind of a cold water lake, high altitude, 6,200 feet, and it never really got warm. So if something happened, I always wanted to make sure we were in distance of swimming to shore. There's a good reason for that. Many times we came home late at night on that lake, and the waves out there and the swells, they could easily be 6 to 8, sometimes 10 feet. So we knew coming back, we'd come back really slow sometimes just to make sure we were safe. But yeah, Tahoe can be treacherous. So we would always look when we were coming from the north side of Tahoe, we'd look at the top of Heavenly Valley. And there's always be a light way up at top. And we knew if we went to that light, that would take us to Tahoe Keys. Just a little sidelight about my marine safety, and I am fastidious about that on my boat. So, why am I telling you this? Because a horrific tragedy happened in Alaska this month. And since I'm going to Alaska next month on the Alaska Bigfoot Cruise, and I'm hosting 2 different fishing trips out onto the waters of Alaska, I want to talk about this. Because I know that there's going to be people like you that are going to go out there on a boat this year. And I'm going to teach you something that's very important. But today, the importance behind this. August 3rd, 2024, David Maynard, 42, Mary Maynard, 37, Colton, 11, and Brantley, 7. It was a family from Troy, Texas, kind of southwest of Waco. They planned on a family vacation to go see friends and family up in Alaska. Now, Mary was a traveling nurse. What's a traveling nurse? Somebody who works for an agency, and they send you to hospitals and clinics all over the U.S. You get paid really good money, way more money than the nurses working in those hospitals you get sent to. And David Maynard was the one who stayed home with the kids, and he had a landscaping business, so he could work around that and always make sure he was home for his kids. His boys loved to play baseball and soccer. And the Maynards were real tight in the community of Troy. So August 3rd, the family went out on a 28-foot aluminum boat. I know about these boats very well. Many of these aluminum boats, such as Hughes, H-E-W-E-S craft, are meant for this kind of water. They're steel hulled, very strong, very safe. I'd have no problem getting on one. In fact, I have been on them in Alaska fishing on these aluminum boats. I'm not sure what kind of aluminum boat they had. Hughes Craft is the first one that came to mind. Well, they went out on this boat, and there were 8 people on the boat. That's not too many. And they were 16 miles west of Homer, Alaska. Where's that? This is the Cook Inlet in Alaska. This is Homer. This is about where the boat was at. This is Dan Wallach. Now the water out here could get very rough, very thick, quick. But it wasn't that day. So at about 7 p.m., the Coast Guard gets an alert that a boat is in distress and taking on water. The Coast Guard never really clarified what that meant. Whether they got an EPIRB alert, that's like a personal locator beacon that activates when it hits water, or they had a radio message. It was unclear. But they had the GPS, and they put out an alert on their emergency radio for all boats in that area to start converging on this location because the boat needed assistance. Coast Guard was too far out of position to get there quickly. But the first ship on scene was one called the Salty Dog. They get there, they don't see a boat, but they do see one life raft with 4 people on it. They went right up to the life raft and they took those people aboard. They said that the seas were about 2 feet, not very bad. And there were 4 other people that they hadn't found that were still on that initially on that boat, which was the Maynard family. This is a sad one, folks. This is the Maynard family. Dave, Mary, Colton, Brantley. From Troy, Texas. So the Salty Dog starts looking and looking and looking. And eventually the Coast Guard gets there with a helicopter, a cutter, and an airplane, and they start looking too. Water temperature at the time was 51 degrees. And this is important. The search for the family lasted 36 hours. And here's what that's based on: survivability. First of all, I don't think anybody could survive 36 hours in 51 degree water. I don't think anybody can. I'm sorry. The statistics say survival time in 51 degrees, most adults should be able to survive 2 to 3.5 hours. Past 3 hours and 45 minutes, there's a high probability of death. If you have a life preserver on, chances of surviving that at that point is much greater. There's a 50-50-50 rule. That rule is that at 50 years old, you have a 50-50 chance that you could swim 50 yards in 50 degree water. You have a 50% better chance of surviving 50 minutes or more with a life preserver on. Interesting, eh? All boats, by law, have to have a certified life preserver on board per passenger. This is important. I've been on commercial fishing boats many times. And what I mean by that is, last summer, I took a group out on a boat that was probably 28, 30 foot aluminum boat, just like the one the Maynards got lost on. And they never showed us where life preservers were at. They never showed us where a fire extinguisher was at, which they had to have. They never showed us where their EPIRB was at. They never showed us if they had a radio. And this is important. First of all, 2-foot seas should not have sank that boat. No. Why? Because those boats are welded like super strong. But what could have happened? I don't know. The only thing I thought of right away is if they were going 30, 40, let's say they were going 25 knots out to a fishing area, or coming back from a fishing area at 7 o'clock at night, and they hit a whale. Well, I suppose that could have toppled the boat and thrown people over, possibly. But in that instance, you only have a short period of time to save yourself. Now, obviously, if you're a parent, you're going to be thinking about saving your child right away. If you don't immediately know where those life preservers are at, there's a good chance you're going to be dead quick. You absolutely have to get a life preserver on. Got it? I don't care if it's 50 degrees or 80 degrees. If it's 80 degrees, you have a chance of living several more hours. 50 degrees, you don't. You better get that life preserver on. Biggest thing, you get onto the boat, you know where the lifeboat is located. Because realistically, in Alaska, you don't have a lot of time to live in that water. You need to get in that lifeboat. I don't know the circumstances behind what happened to the Maynard family, but I can tell you for a fact, I'd give up my position in the lifeboat to get the kids in there. I'd take my chances in a life preserver, just holding on to the life raft in the water. Make sure those kids survive. Kids are not going to survive as long as an adult in that cold water. Get them in that boat. I'm not making any accusations at all over the people in the boat, in the lifeboat. I don't know the circumstances. And I'm sure that they have survivor's guilt over this. Now, the Maynards were going there to spend time with friends and family. It's an absolute freaking disaster, folks. Absolute disaster. The whole family wiped out. Very sad. Now, why am I telling you this? Because if you ever take you or your family on a commercial boat like this, you know where those life preservers are at. You know where the lifeboat is at. Because in an emergency, you don't have that time. Now, I've been fortunate. I've gone on a few cruises in my life. I went on the Bigfoot cruise last year. One of the things they do once you get on that boat, almost immediately, is you have a drill, and everybody has to participate. It's an emergency drill, so you know the fastest route to get to your lifeboat. And you know where your lifeboat is located. Everybody has their own lifeboat. You just don't go helter-skelter. You got to get to yours. Why do they do this? Because in an emergency, folks, you don't have time to screw around. Just like in this boat accident right here. You don't have time. You've got seconds. And you better be thinking clearly. Now, I know when you're on a boat like this, kids don't like to be wearing life preservers, even if they know how to swim. I'm sorry. You got real young kids on that boat, if they're on the boat, they're going to have life preserver on. That's my world. Too many things can happen. Too many things can happen. want to set up a prayer to the Maynards, all their friends and family in Troy. I hope they're in a better place. Now let's get to the story. Over the last several years, many of you have asked me, Dave, has a searcher ever gone missing in a search? Oh yeah, it's happened. It's very rare. And we're going to talk about a case where a searcher did go missing. Now, why is it rare? Well, most of the time searchers know the area very well that they're searching. Most of the time, they're with other searchers who also know the area. Every searcher brings a bag of tools with them. And I don't mean actual tools. I mean survivability manners. How you and them can survive. If you go missing by yourself, your chances of survival, let's just say, are 20%. You got somebody else with you? Doubles. Why? Many reasons. Sometimes one person's not thinking clear, but two people, one of them usually is. Also, there's, believe it or not, this strange factor about keeping each other warm. Now, this incident that I'm going to tell you about happened October 10th, 2011. I wrote about it in Missing 411 North America and Beyond. And we were just talking about the Maynards in Alaska. Well, this case I'm going to tell you about right now happened in Alaska. October 10th, 2011, 6:45 p.m. Northeast of Fairbanks, 69 to 70 miles northeast. On or near the Steese Highway. S-T-E-E-S-E. Been to Fairbanks many times for kids hockey. Go north of Fairbanks, you should take the Steese Highway right here. Goes way out there. The further you go out, the less that's going on. Well, they were out at mile marker 69 miles from Fairbanks. Again, not much out there. Circumstances is that a woman went missing. A woman named Melinda Strait out of Utah. Deberry, Gerald Deberry, 53 years old, lived in this area where this woman went missing. And Deberry was a veteran of many searches. He knew the area he lived in like you know your backyard. He knew it very well. So he was one of those people that searchers liked because he kind of knew where people would go missing, had an idea where you might go on an ATV. Now, the search started at about 2 a.m. when Melinda went missing. She got separated from 4 other four-wheelers, ATVs. And her brother contacted Alaska State Troopers at 2 a.m. and they started contacting local searchers, including Gerald. They were able to rally everybody together at about 7 a.m. that next day, or that same day, that same morning. And Gerald was there. At about 10 a.m., other searchers said that they happened to meet at a trailhead together. And Gerald said he was really cold. And one of the searchers opened up his toolbox, and inside he had another big coat, gave it to Gerald. They decided to take a break. They started a fire, and all of them got warm. It was a very cold morning. After about 45 minutes, everybody was warmed up, ready to go again on their machines. Gerald said thank you, put the coat back on, and away it went. Well, at about 6:30, the search goes on all that time. Alaska State Troopers had a helicopter up. They had all kinds of people looking for Melinda Mindy. At 6:30, some troopers found her. She was cold. She was okay. And they got her back to a local lodge. And they gathered all the searchers together. This is normal. You get them all together. You thank them. You make sure everybody reports back. This is another perfect example of why you do this. And just about they're ready to send everybody home, they realize Gerald's not there. Well, that was odd because everybody knew him really well. And they knew that he was riding a green Yamaha Kodiak four-wheeler. Nobody had seen it. Last time they saw him was at about 10 o'clock that morning when they gave him a coat. So they went back out, searched until about 8:30 that night. It got brutally cold. They all came back in. Alaska State Troopers called for a full search and rescue the next day with assistance from the military because they knew something was up. They knew Gerald would have been back. He knows the area like the back of his hand, and he knows how to ride an ATV. Next day, October 11th, 7 a.m., 2 Alaska State Trooper helicopters landed in the SAR zone. They also brought in 2 Alaska State Trooper Piper Cubs. Piper Cub can fly pretty slow and cover a lot of ground. And they also got a military helicopter from Elmendorf Air Force Base and a night-flying Pavehawk Hilo from another Air Force base and 2 Civil Air Patrol planes. So they got out a map of the area and they divided up the airspace for the helos. And then they brought in an extra 10 Alaska State Troopers on ATVs to cover more ground. They knew that Gerald had to be pretty close to the trails in the area because he was on an ATV. And he knew not to go way off the trail because he'd get stuck. So everyone was really confused. At this point, the governor called out the National Guard and dispatched ground teams late in the day on October 11th. So that day, at about 8 p.m., everybody comes back in frustrated. They mark off areas that were searched. And the following day, October 12th, new areas are searched, ground and by air. There was a massive turnout. Gerald was a local favorite. Everyone loved him because he was always there to help everybody. And people got together from local lodges and started to feed the searchers because they knew they had to keep them warm and they had to keep them in the field looking. October 13th, another massive day, massive turnout. People with ATVs from all around the area showed up. Helicopters were still flying. They had one helicopter that flew almost the whole night with night vision. Didn't see anything. Nothing was moving. October 14th, a local lodge owner named Paul Potvin stated, "This is a true mystery. I'm an old friend of Gerald's. He didn't get lost." Why is that important? Because they're searching for people that are lost. If Gerald wasn't lost, where was he? October 15th, another huge day. Alaska State Troopers calls everybody in at the end of the day and says, okay, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? What are we going to search? What did we miss? So they retracked some of the ground that they had covered before. It had snowed during the previous days. It was freezing cold. They seriously doubted if Gerald could live much more than what he had already, they hoped. October 17th, search and rescues terminated. Too much snow on the ground, too cold. Didn't think he could survive. Didn't understand how they could miss his ATV. They threw up their hands in frustration. Nobody could remember in Alaska State Trooper time, the last time they had lost a searcher. It's a lot to say, folks. In total, they had over 100 ground team members, including the National Guard, out there looking. A huge effort. A much bigger effort, I would say, than they would for you or me that got lost, because he was a searcher. Well, June through July and August of that year, a lot of friends went out there looking for him, looking for that ATV. Why? Because the snow had gone, and they still had a pretty big target. ATV's pretty big. Should be able to find it. Well, Labor Day 2012. Yeah, 11 months after Gerald disappeared, some miners were at mile 69 on the Steese Highway, not far at all from where the search had occurred. They are on the other side of the highway, just over a little mound of dirt, call it a small hill, and on a slight incline in the tundra, they find Gerald's ATV. The engine was turned off. There was some theory given that because it was on the incline and in tundra, it might have not been getting gas and he stalled it on that hill. But there was no doubt Gerald got there by going down a road across the highway and then up this hill. So the idea that he got lost makes no sense at all. All he had to do was follow his tracks back to the house along the Steese Highway and the road. There's no mystery here. It was also strange that because it was within a mile or 2 miles of the original search, that FLIR and the helicopters never caught this. The massive amount of people committed to finding Gerald, and nobody saw this. Hard to believe. Well, after they did find the ATV, there were 3 days where everyone in the community pitched in again trying to retrieve Gerald's body. They didn't find it. Again, something that makes no sense to me at all. But Gerald's never been found. Again, this is Gerald, 53 years old, disappeared in 2011. Now, I gotta say that the chances of finding anything related to Gerald in Alaska are almost zero. There are so many animals that would clean up any type of body that's on the ground. After 13 years, there's probably nothing left. Maybe some leather goods, his shoes, his belt. That'd be about it. I mean, the forest floor in Alaska is very efficient at getting rid of things. Now, you all wanted to know about a searcher? There's your one case. There's been others I've written about in the books. But this one in Alaska is very strange. So, please say a prayer for the Maynard family. Let's hope they got to heaven and they're safe and happy. And Gerald, he died serving his community. He died being a good person. How many of us could say that about the death of somebody we know? And would you do that for a member of your community? I really, really appreciate you being here. This village that we've established has a lot of really great people, and I understand that. Please, if you can make sure you are subscribed, There's about 10%, maybe even more, 20% of you that are unsubscribed every other week. I can't explain it. Equal number of you don't get notifications that my videos are up, even though I post every other day. It's a guarantee. I ask you to just check, make sure you're subscribed. You can watch my movies on Tubi right now for free. Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted, Missing 411 The UFO Connection. If you like to read, don't buy my books anywhere else other than my website. Website is NA like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Our missing person website, Can-Am like Canadian American, CanAmMissing.com. You can follow me on X at David Paulides at Can-Am Missing. Paulides, Paulides. I read all of your comments. I read them all. So thank you for being here. You are appreciated. Paulides out.